This is the conviction of the Central Park Five. The morning of April 20th, 1989, a 28-year-old woman who was an investment banker was found in Central Park. Her name was Tricia Miley, also known as the Central Park Jogger. She was found by two individuals in the park that morning. She was left for dead, badly beaten, and repeatedly raped. She was taken to the Metropolitan Hospital in Manhattan, New York, and was in a coma for nearly 2 weeks with a fractured skull and lost 80% of her blood. She had no memory of the attack when she woke up from her coma. That night that Tricia was attacked, as a group of 30 teens were hanging out in the park. They were hurting others and harassing the homeless people. The 5 teens that were found guilty and jailed for the attack against Tricia Miley were ages 14 to 16 years old and were Hispanic and African American. Their names were Kevin Richardson, 14, who was taken in first; Raymond Santana, who was taken in first also with Kevin; Yusef Salem, 15, and Antron McCray, 15, who were taken in the following day; and Corey Wise, 16, who was taken in for other crimes. 2 other boys were arrested, Stephen Lopez and Michael Briscoe. They pleaded guilty to charges that related to other attacks on joggers that same night in Central Park, and avoided Tricia Miley's trials. The 5 boys admitted to touching and restraining Miley while one or more assaulted her. But the DNA at the scene did not match any of the 5 teens. Later, the boys took their statements back. They said they were coerced by police into false confessions. And in 2016, Salem stated him and the other teens were deprived of sleep, food, and drinks for 24 hours. There was 2 trials. McCray, Salem, and Santana were found convicted for rape, assault, and robbery, 5 to 10 year sentences in a juvenile detention facility. Richardson, who was convicted for attempted murder, rape, assault, and robbery, would also serve 5 to 10 years sentence in a juvenile facility. Wise, the only teen tried as an adult and convicted of sexual abuse and assault on the attack of Tricia Miley, and would serve a 5 to 15 year sentence in prison. 12 years later, in 2002, a man named Matisse Reyes confessed in prison to the crime against Tricia Miley. Reyes was a murderer and rapist who was at the time serving 33 years minimum sentence in prison. He also committed a similar crime to Tricia Miley's 2 days before her attack. Reyes says he acted alone and at the time was 17 years old. The police then tested his DNA for the DNA found at the scene of the crime. The DNA tested positive that was found on Tricia Miley and inside of Tricia Miley. But even after finding out that Reyes was guilty of Tricia Miley's attack, he could not be tried because the statute of limitations had expired. Reyes was serving his time in the same prison as Wise, and Reyes knew that Wise was in the same prison and was serving time for the crime that he had actually committed against Tricia Miley. He says that he found Jesus and was trying to turn his life around and to do the right thing, but also feared what would happen to him after he had confessed. The 5 boys that were found guilty 12 years before were then vindicated, and a couple months later, all the charges were thrown away. The 5 boys had already served their times. except Corey Wise. He was still in prison, but was then released after finding out Reyes confessed for the crime of Trisha Miley. And a year later, after charges were thrown away for the 5 boys, the 5 men sued New York City for malicious prosecution, racial discrimination, and emotional distress. The case then settled in 2014 for $41 million. And in 2019, a documentary came out about the Central Park 5 called When They See Us, where the 5 men are now. Kevin Richardson is now 44 years old and lives in New Jersey with his wife and 2 daughters. He works as an advocate for criminal justice reform. Antron McCray is now 45 years old and lives in Georgia with his wife and 6 children. Raymond Santana is now 44 years old, lives in Georgia with his teenage daughter, and started his own clothing company called Park Madison, New York City. Corey Wise is 46 years old and lives in New York City and works as a public speaker and criminal justice reform advocate. Yusef Salem, who is now 45 years old, lives in Georgia with his 10 kids and is a published poet, public speaker, and advocate for criminal justice reform. And he has also received a Lifetime Achievement Award from former President Barack Obama in 2016.